Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. Not sure if you heard, but they just announced on the 3rd anniversary celebration livestream that we will be getting a 5-star Covenant Selector ticket. So this is the first type of item of this sort they've ever given out before. Very exciting. It will essentially allow you to select any 5-star RGB hero in the game, with a few exceptions. Let me pull up the exact announcement here so we can see. Okay, so you can see here it's the Ezerin Foundation Day 5-star Covenant Hero Selector ticket, and here are the exceptions. You cannot select Senya, Bomb Model, Kana, Ilyanov, Xeno, Yuna, or heroes that were included in the limited summon and collaboration. So this is coming out tomorrow, Sunday at 10 a.m. UTC. So I think that's roughly 5 or 6 hours from when I'm recording this, so it's not out yet. I thought it would be a good opportunity to go through and discuss, the options on heroes that you could summon and which ones, would be worth picking. We are also getting a bunch of Covenant summons for free as well, I believe, over the week, the typical 10 a day thing. So you may be better off just waiting and holding on to that ticket, the selector ticket, for a little while, since it lasts for 7 days before you have to make a decision or it goes away. And you could theoretically pull the hero that you want in those free summons. So if you're really managing your resources tightly, probably worth doing that. Otherwise, just go ahead and jump on in. So let's see here. I think this should be pretty much all of the red, green, blue ones. So we're going to skip over the Moonlight heroes since they are not going to be included in the selector ticket. Yeah, we're going to sort by grade, so we'll see the 5 stars first. Okay, so we're just going to go through the list here. Cecelia, not super meta right now, not really used, so I would not recommend her. She's just not super relevant, doesn't really do enough in the current meta. Cecelia is meta relevant right now, so you could definitely consider Cecelia. She has an exclusive equipment that gives her 10 more speed. She does a ton of damage. You can see here on her skills that she's able to go into stealth. This is very important for DPS right now. Her reset ability is relevant. She provides a powerful AoE ability, and then really powerful single target damage. So Cecelia is a very relevant hero right now. She's useful for taking into things like Carrot, and other fire heroes, like potentially a Fire Charlotte or something like that. So this is a hero I would recommend if you're a little bit later game and are getting into RTA and are trying to round out your roster a tad. So Vildrate is another 5-star hero that you could select. I think he is a really good option as well. He has a speed imprint, so you may be needing imprints of him. He provides a good amount of AoE damage, as well as a CR boost, when somebody dies, it boosts him up. And does it boost your team up or just him? I think just him. But for the most part, he is used for his speed imprint here. You can see for the team, it's useful for cleavers. So if you're a later game player and you need a additional tool in your cleave, toolbox, then Vildrate could be a good go-to. Fire Charlotte has recently become very meta relevant. She's probably one of the strongest bruisers right now, so you could definitely consider getting Fire Charlotte. I don't know how long she will be relevant. It seems like bruisers last at least a season or two, and then they kind of get replaced by somebody else. And she became relevant at the end of last season, so I feel like it would be pretty safe to take her. She provides a ridiculous amount of AoE damage, and as well, her debuffs are pretty relevant. Decreased attack and unhealable do a surprising amount of work. The fact that she buffs herself with attack and defense buff whenever she gets hit with damage, and she has an EE that gives her a CR boost whenever she gets hit, means you can kind of build her slowly and greed on other stats. And she hits like a Mack truck, let's just say that. You put her on lifesteal and she's very hard to kill. So if you're a bruiser player or turn 2 player and you don't have Charlotte, I would recommend her. I think she's worth picking. Bale and Cezanne, garbage, not worth taking. Euphine, also really not relevant right now, unfortunately. Fire Ravi used to be really relevant, probably in Season 2 and beginning of Season 3, and she fell off pretty hard. Units like Cecelia really wreck her. Units like Rem really wreck her. She just doesn't do enough right now. Carrot, doesn't really do enough against Carrot either. So Ravi is sadly not as relevant as she used to be. Can't take Ruel, obviously, because she's a Moonlight. Kayron, not a good pick either, I don't think. He is just countered by so many things right now. Viseria counters him, lots of blue DPS counter him. He is just countered too hard by too many units for him to be super relevant. You could theoretically niche pick him as a 5th against the right team that doesn't have a counter, but I think there's just better options for you to do. Aceria is a good hero for PvE content. You know, she's useful for some Abyss floors, and as well can be used in certain expedition teams and things like that. So I think that Aceria is a potential option if you're a newer player and you're looking for something that will help you, you know, with that PvE content. Charles, not really relevant right now in the PvP meta. He has some uses in PvE, like he's in a Banshee one-shot team, and he's actually in a few other one-shot teams as well. So could potentially pick up Charles if you're looking specifically for someone, you know, for that type of content. PvP-wise, he's not really doing much right now. He could be an imprint for ML Charles, but ML Charles is also not really in a super strong place himself. So I'd probably skip on him. Yuna and Strays are not available. Sez is not relevant at all right now, unfortunately, so I would not pick him. Haste, you could consider just to get an imprint for Blood Moon Haste, but beyond that, he doesn't really have any use. Tywin, likewise, an imprint for ML Tywin, otherwise pretty useless. Mui, you know, I think Mui could actually be used in PvP. She has some unique things with the attack buff and the stuns and strip and stuff, so I feel like she could have a place in like a really speedy cleave control team, but I wouldn't say that she's super meta relevant. Fire Litica, not super meta relevant either. I don't have her actually, but I can't say that I would recommend getting her. Ken, also just not really relevant right now. I guess he might be used in an expedition team or something, but yeah, he's not a great option. Same thing with Aramentha, I would skip her. Blue Chloe, not a PvP hero, but she's actually a good hero for Wyvern 13, so if you're brand new to the game, you could consider picking her. I think that you'll have a selector summon in the beginning, and there's a good chance you can get Chloe or Sigrid, and Sigrid would just be better than her, so I'd probably skip Chloe. Tenebria, Fire Tenebria is not super relevant. She is used in PvE for, I believe, the Fire Expo. She's pretty good there, so that would be one potential use for her, and she is used on some Abyss floors as well. So she is kind of like Iceria in that like there's some PvE uses for her, and she does make certain content more accessible, or you know, you can get past it more easily with her. So if you're looking to accomplish that, then you could consider it, but from a PvP standpoint, she's just not really doing much. Basar is a strong hero. He's fallen out a little bit of the meta right now, but he's always a threat, and if you don't have Basar, I could make a reasonable case for picking him. I think there's probably better options, won't go over those, but he is a hero that does a lot, and that, you know, the soul burn that ignores effect resistance, pushes back and does unbuffable, it can be pretty crippling. And so against the right player that either doesn't have those answers built up, or if you take him in the right spot in a draft where they can't really draft those answers, I think Basar is actually still a relevant hero and is a viable choice to pick. Luna is limited, so you can't pick her. Tamarine is the queen of PvE, has been for a long time and probably will be for, you know, a good while yet. She trivializes a ton of PvE content like raid, story, you know, many Abyss floors. She's great in expeditions as well. Hall of Trials, she's good. Her usage in PvE, sorry, is pretty widespread. From a PvP perspective, she doesn't really do a whole lot. You know, there used to be that Tamarine Iceria cleave. I don't know if people still do that in Arena. I'm not really much of an Arena player, so I don't think she's super relevant, though. You know, in that type of thing. But if you're a new player and you're looking for a hero that will really boost your PvE progression so that you can start getting into PvP more quickly, Tamarine is definitely viable to take for that reason. Lugwood, people are not really using right now, so I can't recommend him. He does a ton of damage, but he, I think, requires a bit of setup and is pretty vulnerable, so I'd probably skip him. Blue Crow is a super solid unit for PvP. He offers a lot. He has defense buff for your team, which is very valuable, and his skill 3 is really what defines him. The fact that he can nuke, you know, a single hero on their team, essentially one-shotting them, is a very, very valuable ability to have on your side. And it makes it so that you will have a hero that provides mitigation because he's a knight, so he can hold Aureus, and give defense buff, so he's doing all of those things a knight normally would do, but then he also gives you the way to answer many heroes that are pretty problematic in the meta right now, and he's a hero that has really stood the test of time. So I would recommend Crow if you don't have him. I think he's a strong choice. Examples off the top of my head would be like Rem. You know, she's really strong right now, but Crow can just one-shot her, you know, if he takes enough damage. So lots of other heroes like that, you know, Crow can just take care of, and it really fills in a key role in your draft to answer certain things, and if you have him, then you don't need to draft a second unit that would also, a second unit to provide that answer. Green Bologna, can't really say I would recommend her. She can be used in some PvE content, but I think there's just probably more useful heroes overall to take, like Tamarine and stuff like that. Blue Sigrid, really strong for Wyvern 13. As I mentioned earlier with Chloe, I think Sigrid is likely the best Wyvern 13 DPS you could pick. So if you did your summon selector and you didn't get her and you're really struggling, you could consider her for that reason. I think this selector ticket is probably better used on a different hero, and I think you can probably get a Sigrid in the beginning of the game, on your selective summon just by re-rolling, though, if you really want one. That said, if you didn't get one, now could be a good time to pick her up. Cowric is getting buffs soon, and I think he'll be very strong for PvE. He will require a lot of speed DPS gear, so keep that in mind. This is not a hero that you're going to be able to gear with mediocre equipment. This is going to be an in-game DPS, type of hero. So similar to the type of gear that Pavel would use, that's the type of gear that Cowric is going to use. And if you have that type of gear for him and you don't have Cowric, I think he would be a very strong choice because he's going to be able to hold book, go super fast, reset really crucial heroes like Maid Chloe, provide a ton of damage, and put himself into stealth. So I think he'll be relevant. Here's Violet. Violet actually was not meta for a long time, and he came up recently because he got some buffs, and you actually see him pick now. And part of the reason why is because blue limited overpowered units like Rem have been released, and Violet is a reasonable answer to them. So they changed Violet so that his evasion is now baked into his skill 3, and it's always available when he has his skill 3 up. So he no longer has to get a turn and use Apple to get evasion. It's just present from the beginning of the game. So you put Moonlight Dreamblade on him and he has 55% evasion just at base. If you draft him into blue units, they have to go through that miss check first. So he's really going to evade them most of the time. And you take him into units like Rem that AoE into him, he gets, those focus stacks from getting missed, builds up to a quick S3, and his S3 hits like a truck. So he's a strong counter to certain blue units. And could be a viable pick if you don't have him and you're a late game player. He fills in a valuable spot in the roster. Diane is limited, so you can't get her. Sirmia, not a PvP hero, but she is useful in PvE. If you're a PvE gamer and you're looking for a unit to really push Hall of Trials, then Sirmia is probably the unit for you. I think that's mostly where she's used. It's for Hall of Trials. She's probably the best there for getting really high numbers. For PvP, I would not recommend her though. Pavel is another really strong option for late game PvP. Just like Cowric, he requires very high tier gear. You need really good speed DPS gear to use him. And not just DPS gear, you need DPS gear with really high speed subs. And that's probably the hardest gear in the game to get. But if you get a good Pavel, he really carries you in PvP. So I think he's also going to be a hero that is just going to be relevant for a long time. Even though a counter for him, like Angela or whatever her name is, when she comes out, she's basically designed to be a Pavel counter because she really punishes AoE, and his skill 2 here is an AoE skill. I think it'll be fine. You'll still be able to draft him later in the draft, or if she's pre-banned. We see this a lot with heroes that are overpowered, where you're able to take them early, and just because they don't have answers or they're just that strong, then a counter for them comes out, and they kind of fall into this like 4th or 5th slot. And in the draft, where you can take them if the enemy either doesn't have the counters, doesn't have room in their draft for the counters, or the counters are pre-banned, stuff like that. So as long as book holders will be relevant, Pavel will be good. Cerise you can't take because she's a limited hero. Luluka, not super relevant right now. I guess she could technically be used for Wyvern 13. I probably wouldn't use a selector ticket on her though. Vivian, not super relevant either. Could be used in like Banshee 13 one-shot, so if you're really desperate to set that up, Vivian is good there. And I think she might actually be used in an A13 one-shot comp as well, so you could consider that. However, for PvP, she's not really used right now. She just, I don't know, doesn't... I think she requires a bit of setup, and it's really hard to make that work in PvP. So Lilius, another hero that falls a little bit short in PvP right now. There's a lot of different builds for her, to be fair, and I think she has a very strong base kit. Her skill 1, which pulls in an ally, this can provide a lot of value. Provoke can lock a unit down, she cleanses, so I think she has a role. I think she is usable. she just doesn't really fit quite into the meta right now. You can build her as a flurry counter, so whenever flurry comes into the meta, Lilius is a nice answer to that. You can build her high crit damage and use her, you know, alongside high attack heroes as kind of an aggressive type thing. So I wouldn't say that she's the worst option, but I think there's probably better ones. Ray, not really used. The Soul Weaver cleansers like this, I feel like they're not super relevant when we have a lot of DPS that cleanse and bring other things, and then your Soul Weavers bring revive and attack buff and stuff like that. It just seems better at the moment. Maybe we'll see in the future if debuffs become more of a thing. Maybe Ray becomes more relevant. Right now he's just kind of not. Elena is, I think, a really decent option. She has, you know, the ability to decrease AoE damage. She can provide invulnerability, and they buffed her recently, and they baked in Magaraha's Tome into her passive here, which means that you can either use Tome to give her even more CR boost, which is good against, you know, really aggressive cleave comps with like Cerise and Cdom, or you could use her with Doctor's Bag, and then she's good into things like Basar or potentially Pavel, things like that. You can build her a variety of ways. How much effect resistance and speed and bulk you want to put on her can really vary, and as a result you can really build her to answer multiple different threats. So I think Elena could actually be a really good choice. Soul is limited, Baikon's limited, Dizzy's limited. Lilibet, I can't really recommend. She's like an RB killer, but there's just better options out there right now. Maybe for Guild War, I guess you could use her there. Melissa, cool hero, but not super relevant either, so couldn't recommend her. She does damage. I think you could build her fast as like a Rylet counter, I suppose, if you really need one of those. Bomb Model Kana is not one of the ones that you're able to get from this ticket, and you can get her for free through the connection if you want to do the grind, so if you really want her, I think she's very accessible, and I wouldn't recommend her even if you could pull her with the ticket. Alencia is a hero who I think has fallen off. She doesn't just do enough. I think the fact of the matter is that when they changed Frenzy and they reduced the effectiveness of HP scaling bruisers, Alencia fell off and just hasn't really come back. Part of her strength was that later on in Frenzy, she just hit like a truck and would just delete things. Combined with the fact that you got all that free effectiveness, so she could easily defense break, you know, big threats like Ruel and stuff like that. So it was an effective strategy to take Alencia and play for the long game and then just start deleting things in Frenzy. She just doesn't do that anymore, and the way Frenzy changes work now, you're just almost never getting to that late stage of Frenzy anyways. Chu, pretty underwhelming hero, I think, even with the buffs. Can't say I'd recommend her very strongly, but she is a mediocre Ice Bruiser if you really need one of those. Rowana, a very strong answer to SSB, and I think you could seriously consider her if you lack her and things like SSB give you problems, or things with dual attacks. You know, she can be pretty decent into like Tea Time Tenebria, anything like that. It's kind of amazing how many places Rowana actually has. And oftentimes players will draft, not necessarily SSB, but a bunch of heroes that have those types of effects almost unintentionally, and then open themselves up to a, you know, Rowana must-ban situation because they have so many of those things like Lilius and, you know, heroes like that. So Rowana is a strong PvP hero, just she's like a strong counter unit, right? She's not going to carry your team or anything. Celine, cool hero, but just not super relevant. I feel like she's easy to be played around, and she doesn't do enough. So can't say I would recommend her, but she does have some sort of role in PvP to counter cleave teams. Mort, he's going to get buffed, so I don't know, maybe he'll be good, but I feel like injury is still kind of a meme, and is just not going to be impactful enough for him to be relevant. So can't recommend Mort now, with the disclaimer that hypothetically that could change. Elfelt, limited, so can't get her. Senya, can't get her. Ervelyn, I think you can technically use him for Banshee 13 one-shot, but there's better options. And yeah, his kit just doesn't do enough. He's like single target damage. He's like a weaker Rylet, so just use Rylet, I guess. Landy, limited, so you can't pick her. Flan is a super strong hero right now. She's essentially the new Alots that provides not only attack buff, but also crit damage buff. So that's super strong. She has defense break, a really strong hero for cleavers. So if you want to play aggressively, she's very popular in many different cleave compositions. So would highly recommend Flan if that's your playstyle and that's the direction you want to go. Ida kind of came out and then was probably forgotten by everyone. I think she stuns people. I would not pick her. Politis, very strong hero. If you don't have Politis, this would be one that I would put high on the list. She is incredibly effective as a cleaver, also as just an aggressive hero overall. The fact that she can reduce the amount of CR gain on the enemy team is surprisingly impactful. It is just really crippling when you start to realize how much CR boost helps you. You know, when you go against a Politis and all of a sudden the CR, you know, like you have an Elena on your team and you just can't push anyone to the front anymore. And whenever you do push, Politis counters and does tons of damage. She is a hero that can hold book, which is also strong. She can stun on her S1. She has, you know, decreased hit chance and unable to be buffed on her S3. So her whole kit overall is just a very strong hero. I wouldn't call her overpowered at all. This is an example of a very well-designed hero that was viable out the gate and honestly works in Cleave, works outside of Cleave, works in aggressive teams, just a very viable hero overall. So Politis is really strong. Illyanav can't get because she's one of, like, you know, the exception heroes. Rem and Ram and Amelia all are limited, so you can't get them. These guys are Moonlight 5s, all Moonlight 5s, more Moonlight 5s. This might be the end of it here. Let's see. Holiday Euphine, Summertime Assyria, yep, all limiteds, or Moonlight 5s. So I think that's it, because now we're down into 4 stars. Yeah. So let me know in the comments section below which hero you plan on taking. I don't think I'm going to get one of these ones that I don't have, just because I don't think they're super relevant, you know, for like journal purposes or anything. I could consider a Vildrate for an imprint. I might get another Crow for an imprint, or perhaps a Cowrick. Yeah, I haven't decided. I'll be getting someone for imprint. Maybe the one hero that I would use would be Elena. I already have one copy of her, but I have her built as like an anti-cleave with Makaraha's Tome. I might want to make a second one on Doctor's Bag for like an anti-Basar, because the thing with Elena, and I'll show you right here really quickly, is that you don't need to put Molas in her, right? So she's one of those heroes that you can just use without Molas. I guess she'd be better if you Mola'd this, it would reduce AoE damage and stuff, but to be perfectly honest, if you draft her and she gets a turn and gets off her invulnerability against a cleave team, like, you kind of won. It doesn't really matter if you have this or not. So this is how I have her built now. She's basically built just to cut to the front. I'd like to get her a little bit faster, but I need enough ER to be able to not get debuffed by Cerise, right? Because if Cerise goes, you need Elena to push up. Anyway, so that is the video. Let me know in the comment section below which hero you plan on taking. Otherwise, later.